JHK here for the AllStar, and joining me right now is Featherweight prospect Lucas Rosa. Lucas, appreciate you coming on the show, man. First time we're having you on, and I'm delighted to have you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. A little nervous. My brother's fighting on Saturday in the UFC, so always have a little nerves about that. But really excited to be on. And
For sure. You speak about your brother, UFC featherweight Charles Rosa. I know you guys are training all the time, working really hard, and but that's not what I want to talk about right now. What I want to talk about is when you guys were kids, because that's the most important aspect of brothers that fight is when you guys were kids. What were some of the battles like at home?
okay, so I mean, he's like 9.5 years older than me, so it wasn't to me really battles. I was just getting like beat up, and he would tease us in different ways and things like that. Luckily, I have an identical twin brother, so we would kind of try to like team up when he would want to try to pick on one of us, like the other one would kind of try to come to the rescue. We'd always be playing, like me and my twin brother would be playing like Godzilla games, and trying to like smash boxes and stuff, and my brother would just come in and like destroy whatever we were doing, and like come and just tease us, especially on the trampoline. Um, yeah, on the trampoline, he would always like be throwing us around, and like we'd be jumping off the slides and stuff on the trampolines. It was fun stuff. But yeah, he was him, and along with all my cousins, I have like tons of cousins on the Rosa side of my family, and yeah, they may be tough,
For sure,
Right.
and it must have been nice to have a twin brother to like
Oh
you take the legs and I'll take the neck type
yeah,
deal.
people always ask me like, what is it like to be a twin? And I'm like, honestly, like I don't have anything to compare it to because I've been a twin my whole life, but it's pretty amazing. Like your best friend is just around you all the time. So,
That's great. What does your twin brother do?
my twin, right now so he's mainly like a writer. He actually just got some of his stuff like published in a literary magazine, Big Bend magazine, I believe it's what it's called. He's really good at like poetry and that kind of thing. But he also does. He worked heavily with AmeriCorps and that kind of stuff, and did like disaster relief for hurricane relief. Helped like prevent wildfires and things like that. He even learned how to like fell trees in Montana and that kind of stuff. So he was all over the place the past few years, but he's mainly a writer. So
Did you guys both start with sports, or did he not like participate in that?
oh, my twin, no, he was always very athletic. Like we always did things like athletic stuff together. He was actually a finalist, a state finalist as a wrestler, like D2 state finalist. So he was always very skilled at that. But you know, MMA to him is not his passion, and I think to want to do MMA, like it has to be your favorite thing because to get punched and ask someone to get punched in the face for a living, like you have to love it. So, that's just not his calling, but he's like one of the toughest people I know, honestly. So I'm sure if he ever decided it was his passion, he'd be fine, but it's not what he likes to do. So
Yeah, you're speaking the truth about that. You definitely
yeah,
has to be a passion for yourself because nobody, you did you watch the Squid Games? Where did you watch it yet? Have you seen any
no,
of it?
I've been telling everyone, don't tell me anything about it. All I know
Okay.
is there's not squids involved, but I
Yeah.
want to watch Wicked, Wicked soon. So.
All right. I won't spoil it for you. Let's talk about wrestling because I feel
Sure.
like all the Rosa brothers are well versed in wrestling. When did you start wrestling and did it come easy for you from the start?
So honestly, like the very first thing I ever started in was self-defense martial arts, or no, self-defense jiu-jitsu rather. So when someone like suggested I do wrestling, and I started doing wrestling, and I saw that like the way in folk style wrestling they kind of give up their back to because it's more about like pinning position. Like I thought it was stupid initially. I was like, this is dumb. Like I don't think this is practical. But I remember my middle school actually came up to me and my twin brother because they kind of knew our family was kind of like a fighting family in the town, and they were like, "Hey, like if we started a wrestling team, would you guys join?" And so from Seabrook Middle School, where I'm from, like we were the kind of like pioneers of like wrestling for that first year. They incorporated that, and then into high school. Um, I ended up becoming the first like two-time captain of my team at Winnacunnet High and like where I'm from, and ended up winning a state title, D2 state title. So, and that was like, some of the toughest times in my life. Like I cut weight so much for that, probably more than you should at that age. But ended up being like somewhat worth it, of course. But yeah, wrestling is like a big part of, I think we're seeing that like it's kind of one of the most fundamental aspects to MMA. So like to me, like my favorite one to do is like jujitsu. I love training jujitsu, but I know just how valuable like wrestling is to being able to even incorporate any grappling. You need to be able to have takedowns, unless you want to just like strike with the guy. So I feel like those three fundamental aspects of MMA, like striking, takedowns, and grappling, you know, like the takedown aspect is the one that leads to grappling. So without that, it's so one dimensional.
How was being the captain of the wrestling team for 2 years? You have to be the leader at such a young age. It's sometimes it could be, a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, to me, I tried to always like, I was probably a pretty reserved, like quiet kid, but I always tried to kind of lead by example. And then, when it came time to like, make speeches or inspire other people, I felt like I did an okay job of that. And I think one of the things I would see from a lot of people is even like people who are star wrestlers or no star like football players and things like that. They would come onto the wrestling team and be kind of terrified because it's literally a spotlight on you and one other guy. And I would try to explain to people, hey, man, they're just as scared as you are. Um, you need to kind of like dig deep and like think about like what they're trying to take away from you, like all the sprints you do, everything. Like you know that you deserve that, so you deserve this win. So it was pretty interesting. Always trying to get like people from different aspects um, of the school to you know get into a fighter mindset, which is a really hard thing to teach. So I liked that. And it was also awesome to have like I remember I was a co-captain with this kid Colin Courier, who was a very good friend of mine, and then later with my twin brother Francis. So it was great.
All right, all right. Now, fighting, when did that
Yeah.
come into the picture? When did you decide? Where was that moment where, man, I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna follow in the footsteps of all the the other Rosa family members and step into that ring, cage, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a part of me that always kind of knew I was going to be a fighter. Like it was instilled in me, kind of like, and it's not that like my father or like my brother ever like told me like, oh, you should be a fighter. Like I think they probably wanted the opposite, because I was always very academic and into philosophy and creative writing and that sort of thing. Um, but in the back of my head, I would always like, even when I would go into, dodgeball classes and gym and stuff, I'd always be like, these kids have no idea they're like playing dodgeball with a future like UFC fighter. And that's kind of just my mentality, how it's always been. And, and yeah, I think for a while, I always had that mindset, but like, I just didn't know what avenue to pursue, like how to pursue academics while also pursuing athletics. Like I did rugby and that sort of thing, because there wasn't really an MMA uh, gym near my college. So like I kind of tried to stay in the sort of combat sports thing by doing like the grueling sport of rugby, and I was a captain of that for 3 years. But I think the real moment came when I got something called a Watson scholarship. Um, and what they do with the Watson scholarship is they give a grant to 40 people in the country every year to go pursue a passion of theirs. And my passion was on looking at mixed martial arts from a philosophical perspective and kind of looking at it as like a pursuit of knowledge and a key into different cultures. And um, a real big part of that was, I had to create a personal essay as well as a more project oriented essay, and they had to be top of the line because I was competing with thousands and thousands of people across the country to try to get this grant. And luckily I'm a good writer and I interviewed okay, but I think one of the things that came out was just like how passionate I was for MMA. And for me, the realization through my it was actually kind of through my writing was that like mixed martial arts to me was one of the only avenues in which I could, you know, take all the bad things that have happened to me in my life, like, and use it in a way that was good because I've had things happen that were like, took away a lot of it makes it hard to be vulnerable again. And I feel like mixed martial arts is that one platform where you can express yourself and be authentic and be as vulnerable as you want to be. So for me, that like was the place to do it. Was mixed martial arts, was to be myself. And so once I got this grant, I traveled around the world for a full year. Like, and it was actually written into the stipend that I couldn't see people that I knew for a full year. So it's like very much about self growth. And so for a full year, I was in Cambodia training this ancient martial art called Bokatao, which I can get into more if you want me to. It's a really interesting thing. I trained Muay Thai for 6 months in Thailand, and then did Dutch kickboxing in the northern Netherlands and Friesland. So um, once I kind of finally brought that third aspect of it, like I'd done formal grappling training and jiu-jitsu and formal takedown training and wrestling, but I'd never really done formal striking besides like boxing downstairs with my brothers. So um, once I brought that component in and really took all that time to write and reflect on like what it actually was and why it was so valuable to me, that's when I knew I'm like, this has to be my career. This is like I won't be happy with my life if I don't, try to pursue this to the fullest extent.
All right, let's start with Cambodia and Thailand. I've been to Thailand many times, trained a little bit too myself, Muay Thai. When you look at that area of the world compared to where you're from, which is the East Coast of the United States, it's like a shock to the senses, right? Like everything is different, and when you landed there, did you have a cultural shock?
Yeah, there was. I mean, I'd say it was very different from like Cambodia to Thailand. I'd say just like one of the things about Thailand that kind of uh, was really hard to balance was like kind of balancing some of their traditional training style with like what I thought maybe was true to like be healthy about like from what I know from science and like how you know um, like how sports science works and that sort of thing. Like I remember like we would go for like 10-mile runs sometimes, and like I'd be, I'm from like New England, so I can take the heat, but it was tough. Like I'd be sweating so much, and they'd be like, "Oh man, you seem really hot," and I'm like, "I am. Look at how pale I am." I'm like burnt up in the sun, getting chased by like wild dogs, while I'm on these like 10-mile runs and stuff. And then you come back and train for 2 hours in the heat, like 105-degree heat. I'm from Boston, so it's like just not exactly my atmosphere, but like, all that muscle. I think one of the things Muay Thai does, especially in Thailand, is that muscle memory, the exact repetition of like, you know, if you're not good at teeps, even if somebody doesn't show you, if you kick the bag like in a teep like 1,000 times, you're gonna start getting the mechanics of like how to push your head back, how to lean back, how to, lift your knee close to you and then extend it, and I think that's one thing Thailand did really well is like help me with my mechanics. But it was tough, man. Sometimes they'd have me drink like blended up like raw eggs sometimes after training, and they'd be like, "Oh, this will help your muscles," and I'm like, "I guess." It seems more like something my dad would do than like a official thing to do. And, on top of that, like I remember sometimes I'd be kicking after they'd be like 10 kick, 20 kick, 30 kick, and I'd be kicking after the runs, and they're like, "Why are you tired? You should be strong because you ran. Your legs should be strong." And I'm like, "That's not like it takes a little while to develop the muscle." So there were sometimes things like that, but I liked Thailand because of just how hard it pushed me. But um, culturally, Cambodia I thought was the most interesting place I went because um, there's this martial art called Bokatao, and it kind of claims to be the predecessor to all these other, Southeast Asian martial arts, like Muay Thai, like Lethwei, um, like yeah, like those ones basically. Um, Muay Baran as well. That was the one I was thinking, but it claims to be the predecessor, and I don't really know for sure, but I know that when I went there, like I would go to the ancient temples in Cambodia, and they would have Bokatao techniques inscribed on the temple walls, and kind of they claim they got the martial art from observing animals in the jungle and like kind of looking at their survival movements, and then eventually it was incorporated into the Kumai Empire's like fighting styles and war styles and that kind of thing. And so it's this whole comprehensive like style. It's not just striking. It's supposedly has like takedowns and grappling. And the reason that like nobody really knows about Bokatao is because they had a genocide when all the other movies were getting like, or all the other martial arts were getting movie famous in the 70s. They had a genocide under the regime of the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot, and so all the intellectuals had to flee, and that included like martial artists and that sort of thing. And so it's only recently that they've had people return to the country and try to resurrect this like lost but like ancient fundamental martial art. And I actually trained under the guy who basically came back and started resurrecting it. He's the Grandmaster of Bokatao, this guy Son Kem Son, and his son Reach. So I trained under them for like 4 months and stuff, and it was a real honor because I'm like one of the only Americans to ever do that. Uh, and to me, like it's like like if that origin story is true, it's like Muay Thai becomes like it's like mixed with like Kyokushin karate to become like Dutch kickboxing, which then becomes like sort of American kickboxing and like turns into this MMA that we have now. And so to me, it's like really important, as sort of a ambassador for Bokatao because I'm like, well, you know, um, I want to be someone who kind of lifts up those like fundamental martial arts, especially if they don't have a voice. So
Yeah, there's a lot of debate. I've spoken with many people
yeah,
about it, and
no,
I don't
no,
want to get into it because it's like 50 podcasts in a row of
yeah,
different perspectives, right? But yeah, no matter what, all those martial arts in Southeast Asia, they are incredible. And what did you think you got most out of that time? And then also, what did you take most from those trips into your MMA arsenal or your MMA career?
technique wise, I would say I honestly took a lot of Dutch kickboxing with me. Just the way that they use like pattern recognition, like they'll set a pattern and then like break from it to really make you, and that's something, and really like fake out their opponent. And that's something that I try to use a lot in my fighting style. They also like are very conscious of angles. Like one of the things I like the most is something they call the Dutch touch, which is they'll do a Dutch low kick using the top of their shin to your like thigh a bunch of times, like just come down like a hammer, like or like an axe, and then they'll get to a point where they start looking down at it and it hurts so bad it's like a Charlie horse, and they look down at it and then kick high with this high angle, and it just that kind of pattern recognition stuff is something I really appreciate from my journey. I think I bring that along to my fighting style now. But in terms of like more of a mindset thing, I think because of just how different every style was, like Bokatao is more of this crouching style that like and they're very almost like an internal martial art. Sometimes they do like meditation, that kind of thing. Whereas like Thailand is so much about like muscle memory and going forward and backward and that kind of thing. Whereas Dutch style is more about like angles and that kind of wider stance. Um, I find that I just try to like absorb as much as I can from every martial art. Like I think people sometimes get hung up on like what martial art is the best or what's the right way to do things. And the truth is you can learn something from any martial art or any martial artist or even different people, Um, even if it's just something simple like how to stretch from some certain like instructor, I try to pick up on everything and kind of be very open about martial arts.
All right, now you've had quite a few amateur fights so far. What about the first one? The first one, the first time you had to actually step in there. How did you feel ahead of the fight, and how did you feel about the performance that you had?
So the first time, I always kind of thought I had the, fighter mentality from, rugby and wrestling and that kind of thing, but there is a part of you that doesn't really know until you go in there. And I think there was a part of me that like that, I was originally supposed to fight like three different people, but people kept dropping out because I think they must have known I was like a UFC fighter's brother, or maybe they saw like all my Watson Fellowship blogs or something and saw that I've been training for a while. I don't know what it like, and we ended up fighting this uh a lot of the people from my gym, we all ended up fighting like the same team of people from this Cuban kickboxing gym. And I remember like, seeing them, and there was a part of me that just was like, oh man, you're going to lose. Like there was a 98% of me was like, sure. And I just remember the night before, like running everything through my mind. And I just kind of got this, it sounds corny, but I thought of this word just like clairvoyant. I just thought of like clarity. And, from that point on, like that point in the night, I just remember, um, I was like, all right, let's go. This is your time. This is your time to like show everyone like what you've been sacrificing years for, and sometimes like you don't really the sacrifices nobody sees until they come to fruition. Like people don't know how hard you've been working, or like what's been going on in your mind, and to me that was my moment. And so the way the fight went, the kid was like a really good kickboxer. I remember he threw something that surprised. It was a in the air switch kick. He like feinted with one and then switch kicked like in the air. And I remember I barely missed it. Like it brushed my nose, and I'm like, all right, I gotta like, settle this down a little. But I started kind of coming out with more of a karate style that threw him off, and then eventually used some of my wrestling, and then ground and pound. And I remember my coach Charles McCarthy kind of telling me like, um, one of his favorite parts was me just like passing as I was like kind of passing the legs and coming down, hammering down. Because I think sometimes people I think get too stuck up on like, oh, I'm going to like just purely wrestle and I'm going to like stick to him and press. And like to me, I try to incorporate everything into like MMA. Like everything I'm doing is trying to cause damage. So like if I'm passing guard, I'm doing damage while I'm passing guard. If I'm like on top, I'm not just like trying to retain position like a wrestler. I'm trying to like do damage, like really end the fight the whole time. So um, there was that point where I just flipped the switch, and I think there was kind of a point in the second round where the kid initially at the weigh-ins was very kind of cocky, and he was looking me up and down and had like a Playboy neck tattoo, and I'm like, I can't lose this kid, you know what I mean? Um, and I respect him after because he fought like hard and everything, but there was definitely a point in the second round, like in between rounds, where he kind of looked at me and I just like raised my eyebrows. I'm like, "Yep, this is it. Like you wanted me. This is how it goes." So, um, yeah, I was just, and that was like one of the best like feelings of my life, just to have that, to know that like, okay, this is something that like I'm gonna be able to start doing. Like if I start working hard, like these are the results, because you don't really know until you get in there.
For sure. And American Combat Gym, is that where you mainly train out of?
Yeah, so I fought under the promotion Rise, and that's pretty much where all my fights have been. That's Rize, and like I'm pretty sure they have an app you can like watch some of the fights on. But yeah, I train out of American Combat Gym. It's like set up by Charles McCarthy, who's like been my brother's like main coach. He's a very intellectual coach, but very geared towards MMA, like doing damage, like I said. Um, and yeah, we've been growing and growing, and I'm pretty sure we'll have our headquarters is opening within the next 2 months, and that's like going to be a huge facility with a cage and everything. So again, in like Deerfield or near Boca Raton, Florida. So I'm pumped about that, and I think one of the things we have that's just so great is just such a great atmosphere in the gym. Like everyone's trying to learn from each other. There's no real like heavy egos,
For yourself, are you full time training and fighting, or do you have a side job that you're doing?
Right. So my side job is like I'm a senior editor at a company called Captain Words. Basically, I'm good with like writing and that sort of thing. So I just like edit um, all these different articles, like various topics. Uh, but I do remote editing, and for me, I just do it remote because it's like very flexible, and I can fit it into my schedule. Like I can hop on the computer anytime I want and start working and getting paid. And so uh, I know I could be doing other things if I wasn't like dedicating all my time and effort. But to me, you asked me like, am I full time? Like I treat this like this is my life. Like this is like I know that if I want to make it, like I have to treat it like it's the number one priority in my life. Like it takes priority over pretty much everything. Like my social life, my relationships, my like job, my other ambitions. Like this tops it all. So like I'm very disciplined about that. I train probably like if it's not two very long hard sessions, it's like 3 sessions per day. Maybe take Sundays off, and like I get very disciplined about my diet. Like I keep a notebook and keep track of like what techniques I learned, like how I'm feeling, like what's working, what's not working. Um, to me, this is like a calling, so I have to treat it that way.
And it must be such a benefit for you to have your brother there. You can ask him anything you want. He's
Oh,
in the
it's
spot, right?
it's amazing, and the thing that like I don't even know that people realize about it too is that I don't know if it's like a weird genetic thing, but like sometimes there'll be such small subtle things in techniques that like he used to do wrong that like I have no idea what he did wrong or right when he was like my age, but I'll do it wrong in the exact same way that he used to do it wrong, and he'll get so mad and he'll correct me and like, but he knows how to explain things in a perfect way because he had all those same errors, and so just in like a more kind of hyperbolic way, and so um, he'll correct everything I have, and he like knows what my issues are. He knows like what the issues with my stance is, and he knows what the issues in my jujitsu are, and so he's able to point those out like, and it's just so much better when you have someone who can like not only explain like what the technique is that's wrong, but like why your concept of it is not gelling, and like he's able to do that pretty much every time, and he'll like pinpoint things that are going to work really well for me. um and yeah, I mean, he's given me the blueprint, and he took, I think, kind of the blueprint from McCarthy and like try to improve upon it, and that's kind of what we're gonna keep doing. We're gonna just keep trying to like you know take it fight by fight and keep improving on the blueprint. So I'm really I'm so grateful to him. Like I know every like even I get pissed at him sometimes. Like we're brothers, we fight, but I know everything that he's saying is with the intention of making my life the best it can be by like making me into a champion. So
Is he your nutritionist too?
a little bit, I mean, he's a chef, so like he knows what he's doing. Sometimes he gets like mad at me for certain things. Like to me, I'm the same where like I consider eating a hobby. I'm from like an Italian Irish, so I love food. And sometimes, but like sometimes I'm just a little like lazy about like how I put things together and stuff. And he's a chef, so he gets like pissed at me about how I prepare certain things. But yeah, man, he's great with that kind of stuff. And if I have to ask him questions about my diet, I obviously used to cut weight in wrestling when I was really younger, and that was almost harder because it was like you weigh in every 3 days. I had to go to school every day and that sort of thing. So like I've been through that whole experience before. But it's just so much better to have him, like he'll point something out like, oh, you should have a sweet potato before every training session, and I'll have a sweet potato and feel like a mutant, because of how good I feel. And I'm like, wow, like eating breakfast does help. It's stupid things that you could be like, oh, well, of course, but he knows like exactly what kind of foods to use, and of course he's just like a master chef. I'd say like some of the best meals I've ever had was like him making me scallops and shit. So it was nice.
Yeah, of course. Now, what about you? What's the next step for you? Do you have any, fights in the pipeline or?
Yeah, so I have a fight with Rise November 13th. That's just I haven't like I don't know who my opponent is yet. I thought it was October 24th, but they moved the card up, so I'm happy with that. I can eat again in a little bit. um, but uh, but yeah, I'm just looking to fire off fights as much as possible. One of my teammates, Landon, very very great striking fighter, did like said to me one time, you learn more in those like 15 minutes in the fight sometimes than you learn in like 2 months of training, because you figure out like what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Um, like very specific things that you can only learn from being in there. Uh, and I've really found that to be true over the course of my first like, whatever this is, 7 fights, I guess. So, um, I I'm looking to basically fight as much as possible, as many times as possible in the amateurs, because I know that's how you gain experience. I don't want to be going into it as a pro, like feeling like I didn't do enough. I didn't put myself in a position, because once it gets to that point, it's like your permanent record, you know. So, and once I become a pro, like I'm looking to get into the UFC as fast as possible. So, yeah,
All right. Well, good luck to you on your next fight coming up, and it was great speaking with you. Hopefully, we'll do this again in the future as you rise up the ranks, make your pro debut, and then next step would be the UFC, man. Lucas, thank you so much, and good luck to you, and take care.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much, and just a quick shout out to Chucky's Fight. It's a promotion. It's a charity my family runs in New England. We help like combat like substance abuse in the area. So check the website out, fight.com.